nécessaire de notre continent. Que malgré la pandémie, la réunion, que la rencontre se fasse, la CEA et la Commission économique, on aborde des sujets qui sont extrêmement cruciaux, cruciaux tels que nous les avons vus pendant cette pandémie. Je veux parler de cette rencontre du domaine de la technologie, mais également à plus que domaine souhaité l'énergie. Deux secteurs qui sont la réunion, la rencontre se fasse, l'observer et pendant on aborde des sujets qui sont extrêmement. Nos travaux d'aujourd'hui vont s'articuler tels que nous les avons vus pendant cette pandémie. Premier, je veux parler du domaine de la technologie, mais également du domaine de l'énergie. Et la deuxième essentielle, comme le deuxième panel traitera l'observer sujet pendant la pandémie que nous vivons actuellement. Nos travaux d'aujourd'hui vont s'articuler autour de deux panels. Bien sûr, nous aurons également les allocutions de bienvenue et de clôture à trait de Dr. Vera Songwe, qui est la sous-secrétaire générale des Nations Unies et secrétaire exécutive. Donc, le deuxième panel traitera du sujet relatif. Avant d'entrer, mesdames et messieurs, questions excellentes dans le vif du sujet, bien sûr, nous aurons également les allocutions de bienvenue et de clôture, événements douloureux de Dr. Vera Songwe, qui est la sous-secrétaire générale le monde des Nations Unies, bientôt secrétaire exécutive. Je vous propose d'observer une minute pour la de silence avant d'entrer, mesdames et messieurs. Et j'aimerais maintenant inviter Dr. Vera Songwe, sous-secrétaire générale des Nations Unies et secrétaire exécutive de la Commission économique des Nations Unies pour l'Afrique, à délivrer son allocution de bienvenue. Dr. Songwe.
I cannot turn on my... I think we need to turn on my camera. Thank you. Can the host turn on my camera for me? Thank you. And I think Your Excellency's camera as well. Can we have the host turn that on? Thank you. Good afternoon. While we're waiting for the cameras to be turned on, let me start first of all by thanking Your Excellency, President Uhuru Kenyatta, for agreeing to be with us today in this panel. And you were one of the pioneers when we launched the first Africa Business Forum. So it's a real pleasure to have you back again. This time not talking about energy. The last time I think we had a memorable recollection of the conversation you had with President Macky Sall on energy. We're still talking about energy 4 years later because we're not there yet. But we wanted Your Excellency to talk about something that has been on the hearts and minds of everybody as we think about COVID. We're not talking about COVID because we wanted to begin to think forward. What is the build forward? What do we need to do? And so thank you so much for coming. We have seen and we have heard and we have all been in so many different forums where everybody has told us of the magnitude of COVID, how it is affecting the poor. It is going to turn about another 20 million more people into poverty. But then there is some hope. And where is that hope coming from? As at least when we talk about Africa. When we talk about Africa, we see some hope. We see hope on the technology side. We see hope on the internet. We see youth that is doing amazing things. And we thought maybe, you know, after talking about the downside and the vaccines and vaccine equity, and let's begin to think about the Africa that's hopeful and the Africa that can get out of it. And we looked around, and of course, Kenya is one of those places where there is hope. Kenya is a center for ICT. And so we thought, Your Excellency, President Uhuru Kenyatta, again, thank you for taking the time. Let's have you talk with the youth. So it's this combination of ICT, which is the hope, and the youth, which are the hope. Have a conversation around that and see what we can do together to ensure that we can continue to build forward towards the SDGs. When COVID came, there was a big debate about, should we stop the SDGs? Are we still going to meet the target? We think we can, and we believe that because of COVID, particularly in the ICT sector, there has been an acceleration of development, an acceleration of all the activity that is happening there. And maybe I'll just run through a few slides to show you what exactly we're talking about and where we are before we pass the podium over to His Excellency, the President, for his opening remarks. And what we hope is going to be a really interesting conversation around the ICT sector, the potential of it on the continent. We've seen significant private investment on the continent in 2020, even about $2.4 billion of investment in the ICT sector. That's why we want to talk about ICT and business today. FinTech has been leading that with almost about 31% of the overall $2.4 billion. E-commerce 5%, health 9%, but we believe that with COVID, by the end of 2021, we will see a lot more business in the health sector. Next slide, please. Where is this investment going? What are we doing with it? How is it working? Essentially, what is happening is a lot of the funding levels that have increased from 2016 to 2019. You must have heard, and Kenya is a big destination, pulling all the Googles of the world. Everybody is going to Kenya. We hope that they can come across the continent. But with the AFCFTA, even if they went only to Kenya, we know that we will have benefits across the continent. For the first time in 2020, acquisition played a significant role, which also means that there is consolidation beginning to happen. We had almost $1 billion of mergers and acquisitions in the ICT sector. So there's investment, but there is also consolidation, and competition is becoming strong. Africa remains very innovative. I don't know if the slides are up. I don't see them up. I hope they are. Next slide. Innovation in Africa is thriving. We have innovation across the continent. There are hubs in 34 countries. The number of hubs has increased significantly from about 314 in 2016 to 643 in 2019. So 300 to 600 in a space of about 3 years. That's how fast we are having the innovation. And that's why, Your Excellency, Mr. President, of course, one of the conversations we keep having on the continent is about intellectual property rights and how we can protect this innovation, because this is one of these innovations is the next Google, is the next Twitter, and we need to ensure that we can protect it and create those jobs on the continent, add that value on the continent, and get the benefits on the continent. We will not be able to do that if we cannot protect our intellectual property. One of the things we're working on, and we're going to come and seek your help, is to see whether we can combine, there is a West Africa or Francophone intellectual property organization and Anglophone. Can we bring them together like the Europeans have done? The Europeans have recognized the importance of intellectual property. They've actually centralized it, and they're ensuring that they can protect their innovation at the central level with reduced costs and facilitation and access to registration. Maybe on the continent we can do that. One of the interesting things on the continent is that we see that foreign registration of patents is much higher than local registration, than continental, than African nationals registering patents. Simply means that it's too onerous for Africans to register. And so all these ideas are being registered by foreign companies or foreign individuals. We need to find a way of keeping those ideas on the continent. Finally, of course, the gender gap. We're still having a problem. Next slide. Yes, there is a lot of innovation and a lot is happening on the continent, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the gender gap. Next, we have a huge gender gap. Still only 15.2% of all this innovation or all the sort of business in the ICT sector is happening by women. They need a lot of funding. The Economic Commission for Africa, of course, has launched the African Women's Leadership Investment Fund, and we hope that through this fund, we can see more investment and support more women in the ICT sector. Because at the end of last year, we did a coding camp at the ECA. We had 2,000 women with ITU, UNIDO, and a number of the UN agencies. And these women, I mean, amazing things that we're able to do. 2,000 women across 53 countries on the continent working remotely to code and do different devices. And it was really, really fantastic. It shows that if women have the access to finance, if women have the access to technology, if women have the faster broadband, they can do a lot better. So we do hope that, again, you will be our champion. You are the champion of the youth on the continent. but we want you to be the champion of the youth and the women youth on the continent to make sure that this happens. We cannot do all this and we cannot say all this if we do not have energy. And that's the final and next session after yours, Your Excellency. Of course, I said the first time you came to us, you talked about energy, you talked about moving the energy access conversation forward much faster. This year, there's a lot of talk about COP26 and how we're going to talk about energy. We thought we should talk about energy, but not just household energy, not just lighting every house or finding a fridge in every house, but really about what Africa can do to contribute. We've heard the announcement last week of General Motors saying by 2035, they want to go to renewable cars and they want to go to electric cars. Tesla, that's doing that. We believe that on our continent, as Africa, with the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, we actually do have the potential to use ICT and to use energy production, battery production, to be a player in that global space. So we'll be talking about that. DRC, of course, has cobalt. You have nickel, Burundi has nickel, South Africa. We believe that if we look at the assets that we have on the continent and use the AFCFTA to leverage and create a global supply chain within the continent that transforms these raw materials into final products, we can actually, today we are only taking up 15% of the global cobalt market. It is a $3.3 trillion market when we go all the way to the end. We believe Africa needs and has a space in that market. And so in the second session, we will be talking about what we can do for more battery energy and ICT development and how you can do that better. So once again, thank you very much for being with us. And I hand it back over to our moderator, Amadou Maktamba. Thank you all the guests for listening and for joining us in this fourth Africa Business Forum. And we hope that we continue not just to talk about these things, but actually after this conference is to do them and to see how we can take Africa one step forward to the Africa we want on the Agenda 2063. Thank you. We can't hear you.
No, we never get used to these things. So, merci donc Madame la sous-secrétaire générale des Nations Unies et secrétaire exécutive de la Commission économique des Nations Unies pour l'Afrique, d'avoir mis en exergue les thèmes dont nous allons parler cet après-midi et d'avoir véritablement souligné les potentiels, mais également les défis qui nous attendent. Et dans les deux panels qui vont suivre, on ira dans les détails avec les participants et les panélistes pour nous donner plus de clés, d'éléments pour avoir une conversation qui puisse nous faire aboutir à ce que j'espère être un plan d'action pour pouvoir véritablement nous gérer ces défis et ces opportunités qui sont en train de naître. Avant de vous laisser entre les mains très expertes de ma camarade Zain Verji, nous allons écouter pendant quelques 2 minutes le message de notre généreux sponsor, la Banque africaine d'import et d'export.
Sometimes silent films do work. You're forced to focus your attention on the words you actually see on the screen. We've been too spoiled with music and drama. Sometimes you just want to boil it down to the facts. So I hope you enjoyed that silent film. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Karibuni, welcome. My name is Zain Verji, and it is such a pleasure to be here with you today. That we are all gathered here electronically across the continent, sharing all of these screens, doing it this way, underlines the centrality of ICT for the well-being of Africans and our economies. The pandemic has increased the urgency. It has also brought into focus the challenges of inclusion, our ability to provide broadband coverage and affordable access, together with the digital skills and accompanying jobs for our young people in particular. To drive this economic growth, Africa has to play an active part in the fourth industrial revolution and seize the opportunities presented by the burgeoning digital economy. As the world's youngest continent, Africa's young people will be the biggest beneficiaries of robust access to digital technologies. In today's sessions, some of Africa's young digital entrepreneurs will talk with His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, the President of Kenya. They're going to be focusing specifically on Kenya's digital journey, as well as discussing tech opportunities for both the private and the public. Of course, Kenya is #1 in some areas, and the digital space is it. We have been widely acknowledged as one of the continent's ICT champions, and the country's digital economy blueprint provides a roadmap for real leadership in this space. And the results are impressive. The widespread availability and use of mobile money supports a plethora of value-added services provided by mobile operators. As a result, around 40% or so of Kenya's private enterprises are engaged in e-commerce, and roughly 70% of e-commerce payments are made with mobile money. So from this Silicon Savannah, we will welcome His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta to deliver a keynote address. He will be joining us in the meantime. No, he is there. Mheshimiwa Rais, you are ready, and I didn't see that. I haven't had my coffee early this morning. Mheshimiwa Rais, great to see you. It's such a pleasure. You have been an incredible ICT champion. I mean, the whole continent is so proud of how you are spearheading things for Africa. And so from our Silicon Savannah, Mheshimiwa Rais, please give us your address, your thoughts, and it's awesome to see you again, as always.
Thank you, Zain. Appreciate being with you. Also appreciate Vera. Nice to see you again as well. All who have joined us this afternoon, let me all thank you for giving me an opportunity to engage with you on an issue, as Zain, you have correctly stated, that is very close to my heart. Digital technologies, we all know, have the potential to impact positively on the economies of our countries, expand opportunities, and opportunities especially for our young people and our women, but also to improve service delivery and to transform our societies. Further, digital technologies can drive a leapfrogging by allowing us to circumvent physical infrastructure and institutional capacity barriers. And this can lead to a positive and significant shift in the growth trajectory of our countries. So basically, digital technologies have become a key pillar of our response strategy also to COVID-19. And in the face of containment measures necessitated by the pandemic, technology has kept governments, as well as businesses and private individuals running, and enabled international cooperation and engagement as well. And we are all been able to do this very much in a very sustainable manner. It has also enabled our children in some parts to continue learning from home. But I must also hasten to add that much more needs to be done in this area to close the very apparent digital divide that exists across the continent. In Kenya also, my administration has seamlessly switched to virtual meetings to maintain the momentum in key government programs. So, ladies and gentlemen, Kenya, as Zain has just told us, has rightly been dubbed the Silicon Savannah, and we can attest to the transformative power of innovation and digital technologies. We have a huge ambition to transform into an industrialized and job-rich economy. However, sometimes lacking the financial resources to immediately address deficits in infrastructure, institutions, and human resources, but at the same time, grateful that we have been endowed with a techno-savvy and entrepreneurial pool of well-educated young men and women who have embraced the digital revolution and its disruptive technological innovations as a spear point to our own development strategy. And this strategy, ladies and gentlemen, is anchored on 5 key pillars. And this is namely providing affordable access and reliable digital infrastructure, development of digital government, development of digital business, development of digital skills and values, and the creation of an ecosystem that enables and cultivates innovation-driven entrepreneurship. And let me, if you will allow, just give a small highlight of each one of these. Achieving affordable, accessible, and reliable digital infrastructure for business, households, and schools is a foundational requirement for unlocking the potential of the digital economy. Today, more than 85% of Kenyans have access to the internet. We have laid down over 6,000 kilometers of the national fiber optic backbone infrastructure that we call NOFB across all our 47 counties. And while we have made significant milestones, we still have unfinished business of completing, especially the last mile connectivity to all our schools and to the more remote parts of our country. With respect to the second pillar, to enable efficient public service delivery, we have established digital services and platforms across the country. Currently, the Kenya government has over 200 both platforms, which are widely utilized, offer one-stop access to essential services such as applying for passports or national identification cards and registering businesses, as well as the registration of births as well as deaths. Kenya is also progressively digitizing core government services, such as the filing of tax returns, land registries, court procedures and rulings, and public service records. The third pillar of this framework is supporting the growth of digital business. And in Kenya, the growth of e-commerce has been underpinned by the success in the mobile money payment platform that we refer to as M-Pesa. About 40% of private enterprises in Kenya are today engaged in e-commerce, and 70% of all e-commerce payments in Kenya are settled through various mobile money platforms. In 2020, for example, Kenya transferred close to 5.21 trillion Kenya shillings, approximately $47 billion US, through their phones translating to an average of some 14.27 billion shillings per day, equivalent to $130 million per day. The 20% increase that we saw last year from the previous year was spurred by relief measures on mobile phone payments aimed at curbing the spread of coronavirus by lowering the cost of mobile money transactions, as well as the cash transfers that we were doing to the more vulnerable in our society. The fourth pillar is the development of digital skills and the inculcation of ethics and values to take innovation to the next level and to position Kenya as a technology hub for both local as well as multinational corporations. We are building the technological capacity of our people on several fronts. We have, for example, the digital literacy program, which exposes our primary school children to digital technology. We have also the Presidential Digital Talent Program, which provides a one-year paid internship opportunity to ICT and engineering graduates. In Kenya, we also have the Ajira digital program that provides up-to-date listings of opportunities in digital jobs from local as well as international platforms and curates a wide range of training programs, thereby empowering young people to earn decent incomes from digital platforms. To ensure technology is embraced holistically by all business sectors, we must contain misuse as well as the abuse of technology. We therefore, in our training, pay particular attention on ethics and values, as it is key to the sustainable adoption of technology in Kenya. Innovation-driven entrepreneurship is the fifth and final pillar of our strategy. Kenya boasts a robust innovation ecosystem typified by the more than 40 active tech hubs in our country, including some that are well known in the region and internationally, such as NILAB and iHub. And the tech hubs provide co-working space for members, as well as support and mentorship for young entrepreneurial Kenyans as they launch their startups. The Kenyan government is working with innovation hubs to lower entry barriers for the ICT entrepreneurs and also to help scale up their businesses in country as well as beyond. To strengthen our digital technology footprint, we have established several strategic partnerships. For example, the Smart Africa Initiative, which is a network of some 30 African countries seeking to leverage technology to create a single digital market on the continent. Similarly, we have the UNDP-led SDG Accelerator Lab, which provides a vehicle for partnerships, investments, and business linkages to accelerate local innovation and ideas, including the twinning of Silicon Valley with the Kenyan tech community. Partnerships with a wide range of technological giants such as Safaricom here in Kenya, Google, Huawei, Microsoft, and IBM are supporting a nurturing environment for startups and micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises to thrive. Further, ladies and gentlemen, I'm also leveraging on my role as the global leader for the Generation Unlimited initiative to tap into the useful global experience through GenU's connectivity pillar. So, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe that we are beginning to reap dividends from a flourishing digital and innovation ecosystem, as earlier pointed out. And in Kenya, more than 85%, as I said earlier, of the population has access to the internet, supported by a thriving fintech sector. Vibrant tech startups are also producing a steady stream of creative solutions to everyday problems that place a constraint on our development across the continent. In Kenya, we also have the Digital National Address System that has spurred e-commerce and facilitated technology companies such as Uber, to establish a footprint in Kenya. Simple innovations are also improving health outcomes. The Afia Child Health Information System, for example, is a mobile phone application for reporting births and deaths by community health workers, which is then uploaded by the Registrar of Persons. In another example, the MSOS uses mobile phones to report disease outbreaks and other health emergencies in real time. Digital technologies have also enriched our democracy and enabled participatory development. About 3 million Kenyans use Facebook every day, and many more are on Twitter and other social media platforms. Digital migration from analog has greatly expanded access to television and radio services, further broadening our democratic space. It is notable, ladies and gentlemen, that 95% of Kenyans now have access to financial services. The success that Kenya has achieved in fintech is attributed in part to the unprecedented increase in connectivity that I talked about earlier, as well as the proliferation and the use of smartphones driven by low-cost devices and low-cost data plans. So Kenya's fintech ecosystem has evolved now from a money transfer-centric space in 2007 to a robust, integrated fintech ecosystem today. It has transformed into an integrated payment and banking ecosystem with robust credit and saving platforms such as M-Shwari, M-Pesa, and Equitel. Kenya has also recently implemented a digital ID, which we refer to as Huduma number, through which citizens are assigned a unique and verifiable digital identity from cradle to grave. The National Integrated Identity Management System is intended to be a single source of truth to validate a person's identity. So, ladies and gentlemen, the real breakthrough lies in the way these innovations build on each other and integrate other cumulative social economic impacts. However, for such ecosystems to survive and thrive, we have learned that it requires continuous review of a dynamic environment that supports a robust digital economy. It is necessary to create, for example, the enabling regulatory environment, develop a vibrant, sustainable financial and research support structure to spur innovation, and to partner with a broad range of technology players across the ecosystem. However, we are yet to fully reap the full benefits of digital technologies in expanding job opportunities or supporting the growth of SMEs. Kenya is making digitization central to our post-COVID-19 recovery strategy and a critical accelerator of our SDGs. We must also remember that trading under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area rules, which has begun in earnest from the 1st of January in 2021, to accelerate this integration, the creation of a common digital market, we must also, at the same time, strive to harmonize standards and achieve interoperability in our digital platforms. I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by inviting the private sector to harness the enabling environment that I have outlined, to invest in Kenya, to invest in Africa, and to offer targeted solutions and products, as well as markets. And I believe that this will help deepen our digital imprint, spur innovation, and most importantly, create jobs for our young people. I thank you all for your attention. Thank you all very much.
Asante sana, Mheshimiwa Rais. Thank you very much for putting us in the lead there on the continent for some of the great work that you and your team have been doing among some fantastic initiatives that you've described there. Thank you very much. And Vera Songwe also, thank you for hosting this event and roping in his to talk to some of our amazing entrepreneurs that have some questions for you, Your Excellency. The entrepreneurs are very talented and they come from multiple places across the continent, and they've got some very incisive and interesting questions for you to hopefully have a little fun with. Vera, would you like to say a few words before we jump in?
No, just to thank His Excellency. I think that he has picked on, thank you for mentioning Gen U. Of course, this is part of a Gen U initiative, and we hope that you will continue to champion that. Women, we're only 15% in that space. So please help us get more. I think with your leadership, we can do more, and also on the IPO side. But I think clearly everybody who is listening, and we have a large group of people listening, there is no doubt that Kenya is leading on the ICT sector. There is no doubt that amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, there is hope and there is a bright future in the ICT sector for many on the continent, and you are leading that, and we continue to count on your support and your presence to the ECA, first of all, let's not forget also. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Vera.
And also the use of governance, just if I may, just one thing. I know that this is a little bit tricky, but I must say that President Uhuru Kenyatta was the first one to come out and use ICT on the continent for better governance, improvement in governance. We did the Huduma Halisi event with you, which is essentially talking to citizens and saying to citizens, you know, can you tell us how well your services have been? I think that was an ambitious but bold attempt. It was risky. President Uhuru Kenyatta, you took the risk, and I think we're seeing the results today. So thank you for showing that one can bring together technology, governance, civil society, and public services in a way that makes and works better for the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vera. And speaking of risk, let's go right away and introduce you. Excellency, a great pleasure to welcome Credence Gonga, founder of We Tech, Women in Entrepreneurship and Technology. It's an association in Cameroon that's supporting women in providing digital skills training. Mr. Dominique Wambugu is the co-founder of Mukulima Bora. It's an agribusiness platform in Kenya with over 10,000 farmers. Ms. Awa Kaba, co-founder and CEO of Soretul, the first digital platform that distributes agricultural processed food and cosmetics in Senegal. And Mr. Alexandre Costa, who's the founder and CEO of Baobab Plus, that develops access to energy and digital in Africa through classic microfinance loans or a pay-as-you-go model to make solar and digital products affordable to all. All right, so first question, Credence, you are on the spot. If you keep your question short and sharp for His Excellency, you're welcome to tease him every now and then if so warranted. I think he can take it on. Credence, really ask your question. Credence? Can we idea her, please? Just, yeah, okay, go.
So good morning, everyone. It's an absolute honor to be on this panel. So thank you for this opportunity. To go straight to the point, my first question to His Excellency will be in terms of financial inclusion through ICT. What are the effective policies that have been implemented in Kenya in order to reduce the gender gap, especially when it comes to women, and what have been the outcomes so far? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, President, for that question. And indeed, as has been said severally, and that applies also to the digital environment. You leave out women who compose 50% of our population, if not more, as I keep saying, if not more, of our population on the African continent, you have basically locked out 50% of your workforce. You have reduced your capacity of growth by 50%. So one of the key and fundamental things that we all need to recognize is that we must begin, and we have to involve women, and women must be at the center of our development agenda, and that applies to ICT as well. And what does this mean? This means that we have to ensure that access to education, that is the beginning part. And in Kenya, we have said that no girl should be absent, and that we want every single Kenyan child to be in school, because that lays the primary foundation, education. And we have gone even a stage further, and we have said that all Kenyan children must have an education all the way from ECD or early learning up until they complete their high school education. The same applying for boys as well as for girls. And we're happy to note that today we have actually reached parity in terms of education in Kenya. Secondly, we have also gone and said, even if the unfortunate situation occurs and a girl finds herself pregnant while still attending school, that girl must be given an opportunity to complete her education so that she is not left behind. On top of that, we are also saying that as a government, in order to encourage our women and our young people, we have set aside 30% of all government procurement. And we have said 30% of all government procurement is consigned to women and to our young people in order to give them an edge, an entry point into the mainstream economy, and to ensure that they are also active players and participants in business. But we're also trying to strengthen what we're calling female mentorship as well, where we're trying to encourage especially the more successful women in our country to also go out there and become mentors and give encouragement to young girls across the country, and showing them that they too have the capacity not only to be or to achieve what they have achieved, but to achieve even greater things. And this is something that we are constantly and actively working on, as well as pushing hard to ensure that at least we have achieved the 2/3 gender rule in all government bodies, so that women are active participants, not only just in the private sector, not only just in agriculture, but also in government, while at the same time having adopted a rule that allows women in Kenya now to also inherit property. So they are no longer going to be inherited, but they become inheritors of property. This is all trying to say that our girls are equal in every single manner to our boys. And we are now just about to go through, hopefully everything being equal, a referendum that will allow us to fully implement the 2/3 gender rule in our governance systems, i.e. especially our parliaments, both the Senate and the National Assembly. These are all the different measures that we are trying to take as a government, as a country, to ensure that we mainstream women into all sectors of our society, from governance to the economy to society, that they are a part and parcel. And by leaving them out, we are leaving, like I said, half the country out and reducing our capacity to become superpowers by actually half. So in Kenya, you have a friend, and we shall continue to partner and to work together not only in Kenya, but across the continent, to ensure that women are able to take their rightful space in society.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I just have to warn everyone that my power keeps going out. So I missed something. Who is next? And who's next? Dominique, is that you?
Yes.
Sawa. Okay, Dominique, hit His Excellency up with your question. And if I disappear, it's not for any other reason except it's raining here in Westlands, and I'm having, I'm not crazy. I'm not going crazy if you look at my expression, my eyes going around.
I'm sure Dominique will agree with me.
I do, Mr. President.
Go, Dominique.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. President. And today and now, I'm very happy because we are two youthful guys from Kenya. And by that, I mean Mr. President himself and me. And I'd like to thank you.
Don't forget Zain.
Yes. But,
excuse me, I qualify.
I wonder which Westlands he is in, because in Westlands we don't have power outage in Kenya. So
no, that's not true.
So thank you, Mr. President, for connecting Kenya. And I'm one of the beneficiaries of the policies that you have put in place in regards to promoting innovations in Kenya. So my question today is based on the field that I am in, which is innovation and technology. And first, I would like to thank your government through the Ministry of ICT and Industrialization for the development of the Konza City Technopolis, which is preparing Kenya in regards to the next industrial revolution, which is Industrial Revolution 4.0. And one of the things that they have done well is the data science park and the data science story that they are building. But on the other hand, I would like to ask a question in regards to the new technologies. And in this, I'll raise a question in regards to the drone technology and many other innovations which are new to Kenya and also new to Africa. So what policies and measures is your government implementing to make sure that these innovations which are new in Kenya and to the market do not die in regards to the kind of policy that have been implemented? Like, for example, in Kenya, we have a lot of innovators who are building drones. Is it possible to have the Kenya Technopolis, which is Konza, having like a drone corridor, like what happens in Malawi, so that these guys who are building these new technologies can be able to implement and not
get
die.
the drone question over to the President. What are your thoughts on the corridor?
I lost you there, Zain.
He's asking about a drone corridor. What are your thoughts on that? Using drones and tech, and like, can you do, like Malawi, for instance, has that?
First and foremost, Dominic, we have no problem with drones. Drones are not banned in Kenya. The use of drones is allowed. But we find ourselves in a very peculiar situation. And that is why it is so controlled. And we are actually actively working now to see how we can loosen it, but at the same time, still ensure we maintain the security of our state. Because unfortunately for us, the kind of progress that we have made is being taken advantage of by great people with great and wonderful developmental ideas, but it is also an opportunity for people who desire to do harm to take advantage. And what we're trying to find before we say we fully open up is how to be able to create that the environment that allows people like you, Dominique, who are focused in trying to help our farmers, in trying to help understand weather patterns and all sorts of other delivery of medicines and other such vital work through the use of drones, how we can allow you to effectively use drones while at the same time ensuring that the citizens of this republic are safe from those people who would want to use those very same drones to cause harm. So this is the environment that our ICT people and our security people are working on to establish. But I will, at the very onset, tell you, drones are not banned in Kenya. All we have is very strict regulation because of the unfortunate use of some of this technology by people who do not mean well for the people of this country. And I think you know what I mean by that. But it is my hope and my belief that once again, through people like yourself, we will be able to devise ways and means in which we can manage, with the use of technology, manage this space so as to allow those well-meaning Kenyans to be able to go about their business while keeping the country safe.
Thank you for that, Your Excellency. Awa, what's your question? Please unmute yourself and keep it quite short and concise for us, please.
Thanks, Zen. My greetings from Senegal. Mr. President, it's a great privilege to have this discussion with you today. And as you know, young entrepreneurs are changing the narrative and perception of Africa. Our wish is when we talk about Africa, we think about full of opportunities, new paths, innovation. In your opinion, how the policymakers could facilitate the establishment of a digital space where startups and SMEs could exchange goods and services to leverage innovative solutions and boost the economy in the continent?
Thank you, Awa, for that, and I appreciate the question. And let me say that I, like you, believe that the future lies with Africa coming together, with us being able to remove these artificial borders and boundaries that were placed by colonialists that divided us. You know, we keep saying that how you just cross one border, you find people speaking the same language, similar cultures, but yet it is difficult for them to trade or to do business together without having a passport. And yet you speak the same language, share the same culture, share the same values, but because you're on this side of the border, you cannot trade with somebody on the other side of the border. So let me begin by saying that at a political level, we have now established, effective January, the Africa Free Trade Area. I think that is a positive first step that shows the political will that exists across the continent to bring our people together, to have a shared economic strategy that allows people like yourself in Senegal to work together closely with your brothers and sisters in Kenya, in South Africa, in Malawi, in North Africa, and to be able to share experiences, but also to be able to trade directly. And through the use of innovation and through the use of the digital economy, to be able to do so virtually, like we are talking to each other right now. So the political will, I believe, is finally there on the continent, and that is why we have the Africa Free Trade Area. But there is still a lot of work that we need to do to ensure that people like yourself who are running SMEs in Senegal are able to communicate are able to trade, are able to do business with your colleagues in Kenya. And this is the area now where we are hoping that this new body that we have now created, that is now based in Accra, we as Kenya are going to give them all the necessary support that we can give them to ensure that we begin to break down the various barriers that exist towards, or that make it difficult for people to do business. We need to start breaking down having common standards, for example, This is the first thing. And that we cannot say that, you know, something that is manufactured in Kenya should be just as acceptable to the standards body in Senegal. Something that is manufactured in Senegal should also have the right of entry into South Africa. So we need to have a proper standards body. We need to have a proper facilitation as to how do we ensure, for example, that the costs of communicating between Tanzania and Ghana, we don't have to have these multiple charges that make it extremely difficult to either communicate or to do business. That we're terminating in France and then coming across to Senegal, as opposed to directly making it cheaper and more affordable. We need to start working on common infrastructure as well, opening up our borders, having the ability that we can have an African passport that Africans can use to travel. These are some of the practical elements that we have to put in place before we can then say that we have actually succeeded. But I believe that, you know, as they always say, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. I believe we now have the political will to do or to start this journey. But we need young people like yourself to put pressure on us who are in positions of leadership to fast track this process and to have leaders on the continent understand that the longer it takes, the more we are frustrating our young people from achieving their dreams and ambitions.
Thank you, Excellency. We will definitely take you up on that. You did, and we'll take you up on that and definitely put more pressure on you, as you suggest, and other leaders.
Just me.
Okay. Just you, everyone. You got that right. Mheshimiwa Rais, you've drawn quite a crowd here for this show today, so I don't know how long you can hang in here with us. If you have to go, just you know, just let us know before we get to some Q&A. Before we open it up to the audience, you know, the EU-Africa collaboration has been quite important, and businesses go across continents as well. And so Alexander Acosta is here to talk to us a little bit about his views on the untapped opportunities and what you see, Alexander, for the private sector to work with governments to create jobs, and context, obviously, of what his Alexander, before we go to the group, and I'm request you to keep it quite tight and brief.
Okay, thank you, Zen. Hello, His Excellency. So thank you for this opportunity. So effectively, I worked for more than 15 years in Africa, where I perceive a lot of opportunities. I think, as His Excellency said, we have seen a leapfrog on mobile money, and specifically, and thanks to the innovative Kenyan's company. And to be honest, most of my business model that I tried to develop in West Africa was inspired by Kenyan's company in financial inclusion, pay-as-you-go, etc. And so I perceive in all Africa, I travel in different countries to inspire my model that I develop, and there's so much opportunities through the digital with e-education, e-healthcare, e-farming. And so the digital revolution is coming now, is now in Africa. And so I recommend to all entrepreneurs that I met in Africa and I work with to continue to be disruptive and to try to find some solutions that are best positioning to better understand the needs of the country. And in terms of financial inclusion, transfer is good, but what we perceive also in rural area is that they need also some loans, some financing to develop the economic growth in those areas. And what is very interesting is that in pushing digital solutions like healthcare, e-farming, insurance, or access to energy with pay-as-you-go, we create some data gathering on those populations. And it's what the financial company needs to provide loans. So in financing some the entrepreneurs in rural areas, and also in proposing to them some digital solution, we will gather all this data and make more capacity to deploy after some financial solutions for them. So, and I think it's a cycle very interesting that we can see. So I really engage the entrepreneurs. I met a lot of them, very interesting. And what His Excellency said also, it's very important, I think, to create some bridge between all countries in Africa. For example, myself, I had this chance to travel in different countries, and we perceive that now a lot of solutions that have developed in some part of Africa, we can also leverage it to exchange. But also,
Alexander, thank you. Thank you, Alexander. Just respectfully, His Excellency, just respectful of his time. Thank you so much for your thoughts and the importance of building those bridges, very critical to our continent as well. I'd like to open this up to Q&A. And the director of Afri-Exim Bank has a question for the president. Could we get him online and ask his question, please? Professor Orama. Professor Orama, I don't see you. Perhaps Excellency, we could hit another question while we get him up, and let's talk about the gender angle. Oh, okay, we'll do that in a minute. I see him. Professor Orama, short, please. Concise question to His Excellency. We want to be respectful of his time. Yeah, thanks. You're on mute.
Hello, are you hearing me now?
Sawa. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, it was, I think, challenges from for the controller. Your Excellency, thank you for a very insightful presentation and the great work you're doing there, and of course, the entire continent. What I wanted to ask is, given the role or the capacity of Kenya to serve as an important hub for intra-African trade under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and the role technology will play in that whole process, I wanted to know the role you would like to play within the Pan-African context, the FCFTA context, to make sure that as we develop technology, that we put forward the goals of the FCFTA. We make sure that it's first used to connect our markets, to develop our markets, and of course, in the process, also it is used to integrate us into the global value chain. Thank you.
Excellency, your role in the FTCA, how you see it.
Thank you, and let me begin by saying that I believe each and every one of us has a role, but the role that I see myself more so playing, or that I am very keen on playing, is that of trying to advocate for deeper integration. You know, we started what we call the Northern Corridor in East Africa, where we actually got to establish that it was very expensive for somebody in Nairobi to make a telephone call to Kampala or Rwanda. And we agreed to come together and to basically remove roaming charges so that a call between Nairobi, for example, and Kigali is now a local call. Just that simple fact of working together with the Republic of Rwanda has allowed the volume of business between Kenya and Rwanda to increase exponentially, just because people are actually able to communicate. The second aspect is this one that is related to the use of national IDs. A Kenyan traveling to Rwanda, for example, does not need a passport anymore. You just need your national ID, you cross over, you do your business, you get back into your country, and vice versa. And the same applies to Ugandans. You just need your national ID card to identify yourself as a citizen. You cross, you do your business, and you come back. But we still have a great deal more to do in terms of trying to ensure that we allow the movement of currency, for example, so that we don't have to keep changing different currencies. We still have a lot of work to do to ensure that we harmonize and streamline our various tariffs and the NTBs that exist that deny our people the ability to do business freely. And I think if I am to be an advocate of anything, I am to be an advocate on the African continent or on a Pan-African basis that tries to tell people we do not need to be fearful that by opening up ourselves to each other, we will lose business. I want to be an advocate that tells them that, look, the more we open up to each other, the more opportunities we create for each other. And we need to get away from this fear of feeling that, oh, you know, if I open up my economy, my industries in Senegal are going to collapse, in Kenya are going to collapse, they're going to be taken over by South Africa, they're going to be taken over by Egypt. I believe it is the opposite. By opening up, we create greater potential, especially for our young people, especially for our SMEs, to boom. And that will be a boom that will be experienced continentally, as we have seen from the various speakers who are here who come from different parts of the continent, each with a dream and with an agenda of what they can do. We as leaders should not be barriers. We as leaders should not fear that we shall lose revenue. In actual fact, we will not only create more opportunity for our young people, for our women, but at the same time, I also believe strongly that we will create greater financial capacity for our respective national governments as well by increasing the volume of trade that our people are conducting amongst themselves. So this is what I would like to be an advocate for on the African continent.
Thank you. We only have time for a couple more brief questions here, please. Just a couple of brief questions. Alain Ebobisse, the CEO of Africa 50. You have a question for His Excellency, and then I'm going to go to precedence to get our important gender question in for the President, and then we can move on with our agenda. Alain, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Zain, and thank you, His Excellency. Great to see you again. You know, with this pandemic, we're not able to come down to Nairobi and meet, but we get to meet virtually. One question that I had, of course, Kenya is a very vibrant market for ICT. I was wondering in terms of the infrastructure that you've been building in the country. I see that the government is quite involved in that. What is your views in terms of having private participation in the infrastructure that enables ICT activities to be vibrant? Of course, as you know, Africa 50, which you are one of our shareholders, we're interested in supporting those kinds of investment in infrastructure, bringing private capital to invest in infrastructure. So what is your vision in terms of infrastructure? And by the way, we've been talking to your team about possibly recycling some of the assets that the government has funded and maybe concessioning those assets to us and others. And the product of that concession could be used to do further investment. So what's your thought on that?
Excellency.
My dear brother and friend, you've answered your own question because the fact of the matter is that we would have absolutely no problem. The main reason we as a government did the initial investment was because of what you are very familiar with. There was a very slow uptake. So we decided that it was important for us as government to fill that space. But we are at the same point more than happy to work together with private sector for them to take on the burden, especially areas that are highly commercial, that have good returns, for the private sector to take on that and leave government to focus on the more remote areas, to focus on schools, to focus on government institutions, and allow the private sector to dominate this, to dominate the more commercial space, both in terms of infrastructure as well as service delivery. So on both fronts, very keen, and like you said, and I am fully aware, we are also very keen to see how we can capitalize on some of the assets that we have already invested in as government to also free up capital for us to be able to focus on where we need to focus. And that is in our rural areas, that is in our schools, that is in our government institutions across the country, while the private sector takes up that which actually can be done commercially. And as a government, we have proved that it is commercially viable. So Alan, you answered your own question, and Africa at 50, and all investors, welcome to Kenya, participate, let's work together, let's move forward.
Great.
Exactly, a good, strong and clear message there. And Mheshimiwa Rais, thank you. Vera and I, Your Excellency, wanted to ask you this question, and I'll ask it, and then Crescendence will ask her question about women entrepreneurs. But Crescendence, you follow me straight away. So the question Vera and I have for you, Your Excellency, is, are you a feminist? Crescendence, your question.
Okay. Why do you have to ask difficult questions?
You have a chance to think. Crescendence.
Okay. So, His Excellency, you have said a lot, and from what you have said, we can see that we have a lot to take from you and to learn from you. So, with your position and the recognition as a global youth champion, what will you recommend to organizations like us advocating for more women in technology and also supporting women entrepreneurship? What will you recommend us to in building more impactful collaboration with African governments, and especially governments like yours? Thank you.
Thank you. Zain and Vera will always give me a hard time. Let me begin by saying, I don't know whether I can call myself a feminist, but I do believe that women have the same capacity, if not greater capacity, than their male counterparts. And I do believe that what has been denied them is the opportunity to be able to show that capacity and that ability. And I have committed myself, both as president and as a politician, to do everything I can to ensure that the women in our country get the same, if not more, opportunity than their male counterparts. Under the very strong and firm African belief that if you support a woman, you have actually supported an entire family. But whereas you support a man, you've supported an individual. That is something we have been brought up with, that is something we have understood, and that is something that tells us the power that women have to drive development, to drive the growth of society forward. And I am willing to play my part and my role in ensuring that I continue to give women that space to expand. And to you, Crescent, let me just say that we will continue to, and that's what I was saying earlier about the role that we can play, is to continue to encourage governments across to have these more innovative type products that allow, because at the end of the day, it's a barrier to entry. And what we're trying to do is to break those barriers to entry. And you can't break those barriers without at least initially giving our women and our young people a stepping stone. We have always said, and that's something that we're even considering again in our constitutional review that we're actually looking at now. It is impossible for a young person to get a job if the first thing you're being told, before you get your job, you must have experience. Where does experience come from if you don't have a job? We want to be able to refine some of these things. You can't get a job unless you have cleared your student loans. How are you going to clear your student loans if you don't have employment? How are you going to get into entrepreneurship if you're asked for capital? We must begin to develop financial products financial incentives that allow our financial institutions to lend to young people, to lend to women based on their business plans, and we as government to work to see how we can work with banks to de-risk those investments, so that, again, that they're also not charged exorbitant interest rates. These are just part and parcel of, together with the other things that I was talking about, giving opportunity, 30% of all government procurement to women and young people, trying to see how our colleagues across the continent can also adapt to that, development of youth funds, working with international and global partners to develop youth funds and youth packages. Like Zain, you will recall, we were with Google, who came in with some $3-4 million. Just for Kenya, this is a package they're trying to do continentally to support women in innovation. We will continue to advocate for things like this, because these are the kind of things that will allow women and young people, I must also add, women and young people to rightfully take up their place as partners in development, as partners in the future of the African continent.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And points of making for your commitment to female entrepreneurs on the continent, and ICT in general, and for moving the needle so profoundly forward for the country and for the continent. Thank you to our entrepreneurs for your questions, and to His Excellency for spending time with them. Also, Excellency, thank you for defining me as a young person. I really appreciated that. I don't think that's the case anymore, doing my roots and all sorts of things. So thank you for that. Let me ask Dr. Vera Songwe to close this out for us for this session, and offer some thoughts for us to take away. Vera.
Your Excellency, thank you so much again for your time. As you were speaking, I was thinking at least, great, we did a wonderful thing. You don't know how many tweets we've gotten, some good and some for your politician, but all wonderful. And I must say, yes, of course, we know you're a feminist. We will call you one. Your Minister of Defense is a woman. How many countries on the continent have a Minister of Defense who is a woman? And I think when we asked you that question, it was really for you to say what you said, so that we could use it to go and get your peers to join this bandwagon of feminism. I think back to ICT and innovative financing, which is also what we're talking about here. Really, I have visited the iCloud factory in Kenya. And it is just a vision of the future. And I think there is no doubt, I think when we talk on the continent, that there is hope and that there is something to do. And for those who don't know about the iCloud factory, it is where young kids, engineers, scientists are programming driverless cars in Los Angeles, are programming NFL games, are programming things in NASA. This is all happening in Kenya. So as you have, the Silicon Mountains and the Silicon Valleys and across the continent, we do know that we have that capacity. And what we need, and this is where we have you, Your Excellency, Mr. President, is for you guys up there to open up the policy space so that we can, this youth can come in and do 20,000 more iCloud factories across the continent and do this better. Today, we're talking about delivering our vaccines, and we say we don't know how. Of course we know how. If any one of these youth could design an application that will make sure that everybody on the continent today that deserves and requires a vaccine gets one. But we just need those intellectual property rights to work. So we're going to come back to you again to see whether we can push on that. Professor Rama is here on the financing side. We need to work with you to see how when we get SDR, special drawing rights, we can buy down the cost of financing so the youth can get access to finance. The women in particular, as you said, can get access to finance. You have hit all the great points. We're going to tweet them. And again, thank you so much. I think this is the kind of enthusiasm that we want to see from our leaders to make us believe that there is a building forward, because in this COVID era, everybody just believes we're done. But I think when we have these kinds of conversations on what are the enablers for the future, we know that we can do better. And on energy, I do want to say that Kenya is one of the leaders on the energy space, 75% connected. Renewable energy is your mantra. And we hope that we can work with you on more of that, because of course, if there is no energy, there is no ICT. If there's no ICT, there's no prosperity. So hopefully we can work with you also to see how we bring that enabling condition for the AFCFTA together to make sure that Africa is a prosperous one as we go forward. Once again, thank you so much for your time. It's not many leaders that give us this kind of time. It's not I'm dressed in a suit. We're all dressed in a suit, and you came like that. You're the youth on this panel, and the rest of us are sort of going in the other direction. So thank you so much. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Vera, for your words. Thank you, Your Excellency. We really appreciate it. You're free to go. And once again, thank you for your time, Mheshimiwa Rais. You're the best. Kenya Moja. Thank you.
Thanks to all the youth and to the investors. Thank you as well. Thank you.
And okay, everyone. So our next session is going to delve into innovative financing in energy, as Vera was saying, because we need the technology that enables an increase in energy efficiency and a reduction of energy consumption, as well as a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in general. This is so crucial, and this is a very important part of our discussion. So I'm going to hand over to our next panel, and also have a video play with some audio. Thank you very much.
Do we need sound? I think we need sound.
Control rooms, looks like we're still struggling with the sound.
Can we go backwards? I can do the sound if there is no automatic sound. But I think what we're trying to do here is really show the importance of energy as a discussion you've just heard. Even when we talk about ICT, 40% of ICT is energy. No way you can do ICT without energy. On the continent, we have 3 or 4 issues that we're struggling with on the energy side. One of them, of course, is the governance of our energy utilities. A second one is financing. And I think that's why we have our panelists, and we're very happy to have our panelists, is what kinds of innovative financing. On the screen now, you have the Africa's energy paradox. Everywhere you go, everybody says Africa has all the energy, we have all the assets, we have water, wind, solar. So clearly we should be all powered, but we are not. 80% of our generation capacity still comes from water resources. We hope that we can move forward. We need about $500 billion to get to 250 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. We can do it. We have the resources. Irena says that of every $1 million invested in energy, actually only 2% of renewable energy in the last 10 years has been invested on the continent. We believe we can do more. We believe we should do more. And I think the next panel is going to talk about what are the innovative ways of doing that better, of doing that faster. To build forward better, we cannot do it without energy. So we're hoping that this next panel will tell us what ways to do it. But the final thing that we want to do is also see how we can highlight and showcase African energy manufacturers, African energy producers, because we've been waiting for a very long time for people to come from Europe, for people to come from America, for people to come from the Middle East, to build Africa's energy capacity, to build Africa's energy infrastructure. As long as we continue to rely only on the external investors, we will not do enough. So we are also hoping that we can begin to build a consortium of African energy producers that helps us to do that. But for them to do it well, Africa 50, Afri-Exim Bank, and all the rest of the financiers will have to provide financing in a way that is affordable and sustainable so they can do it. So that was a little bit an intro into this conversation. Since there was no voice, I used my voice. But now back over to you, Amadou.
Thank you very much, Vera. Thank you very much, Zain. And thank you to all the panelists for the first session, which was really dynamic and great. Of course, we have seen the interplay there. If there is no energy, no point of talking about ICT. And this is really, the nexus of what we're going to be trying to discuss here, because at the end of the day, yes, we have all this dynamic private sector working in the energy, we're working into the technology area on the continent. On the other side, as was just mentioned now, we have completely all this endowment in terms of minerals and really raw materials to have the energy going, but still we have this huge gap. So it is therefore important in this panel, and that's what we're going to be doing shortly, to discuss innovative ways of financing that sort of revolution in the energy sector, which is needed. And quite frankly, there is also an urgency, an urgency to act, because we know, and very often we talk about raw materials, when you're talking about the battery, for instance, we talk about the cobalt, and that's time. We know very soon, maybe in the next 10 years, maybe less, the cobalt would be obsolete and something else would need to be replaced. Now, how do we do to create the value chains and so that we can unlock that power which we have on the continent? And we couldn't really have a better panel today to engage in this important conversation around financing the energy to diversify our economies. It is therefore my pleasure to invite and to welcome to this panel Professor Benedict Orama. You've just heard from him. He's the president of the Afrique Import-Export Bank based in Egypt. So welcome, Professor Orama. He's also the board of directors of the Afrique Exim Bank. Then we've been talking about the role of women in the first panel. And my God, is that important? As the president mentioned, I do away with 50% of our workforce and of our brain if we can use everything. So it's my pleasure to invite to this panel Madame Rolake Akin Ube Filani. I call her the Grand Dame or the Grand Madame of Africa Energy. You will hear from her, and she's currently the Chief Commercial Officer at NICSA Africa, and she's also an advisory board member at the Africa Energy Chamber. Also my pleasure to invite Alain Ebobisse, who is the CEO of Africa 50. Alain Ebobisse has a very wide experience, of course, in financing infrastructure work, and we almost already can see the great job he's been doing at Africa 50 since he joined it. I believe Alain is the first CEO of Africa 50. Then, we spoke also about the women. There's another component which is also very important to talk about, because all of this, inclusion at the heart of it, is what it is. And we will be talking with Mr. Boubacar Diallo, who is the founder and CEO of Benno Energies. But to get us started, we need to have a lay of the ground. And we would invite shortly Mr. Antonio Pedro, who is the director of the sub-regional office of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, for Central Africa, to really set the stage for us. Tell us, where are the opportunities, where are the challenges, and really, what do we need to do to get this revolution I was mentioning earlier started? So, Antonio Pedro, if you're with us, the floor is yours.
So, very unfortunate that I think when the phone comes. So just telling a friend that, see, a president came, I'm talking about President Uhuru here, for a session very informally, and here I am full of suits and ties and so on. So, of course, it's different. So my job today is a very easy one, as Amadou said, is to try and provide the setting for this important conversation. And because this session is on innovative financing in energy for economic diversification in Africa, which, as you would agree with me, it's really a very good combination of issues. Because most of our economies in many of our regions are dependent on raw materials. And that's where the problem lies. And for us to be able to break that cycle of dependence, we need energy. And this conversation is opportune also for many reasons. I mean, including, as you know, quite soon in September, there will be a high-level dialogue on energy. And I think through this dialogue, we hope to be able to set some positions, African positions, because the dialogue has set very ambitious targets, including net zero emissions by 2050 and 100% increase in modern renewable energy capacity globally by 2025. It comes also just after the 5th February interesting piece in Financial Times authored by Leslie Hook and Henry Sanderson titled "How the Race for Renewable Energy is Reshaping Global Politics," with an interesting question. And the question is as follows: as the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy gathers speed, what does it mean for the balance of power? And so my question I'll add is, what does it mean for Africa? So, and that's one of the questions which I would argue we should try to reply today. What does it mean, this transitions to renewable energy? What is the place of Africa in all of that? Do we have a place? Earlier, I mean, the Dr. Vera Songwe, I mean, passed through a couple of numbers that tells the story of energy in Africa, including the low access to energy, the expensive nature of our energy services in general. And as of 2018, the total installed generation capacity in Africa stood at nearly 245 gigawatts, which is a quarter of the capacity in the European Union, which, as you know, has 40% less population than we have. So this is one of our problems. And if you go and digest a little bit these numbers, you'll see that the situation is even deeper if you look regionally, country by country, with some countries in Northern Africa and in Southern Africa, of course, dominating the share of energy access and production. So, in any transformation for Africa's transformation is dependent on energy. The ES said it earlier. And if you look at any of the think pieces, including, for example, the Alda Nepad piece on Africa's path to 2063, choice in the face of great transformation, you see that energy plays a very important role to Africa's transformation. So what are the key numbers to retain here as we think of 2050, for example? What are the drivers? I mean, of course, our population is growing. We know that between now and 2050, we'll be about 2.5. That's the size of China and India combined. And if you look at what happened in China, I think we need to ask ourselves, can we do the same thing when we'll have, I mean, that kind of numbers? And what is it that requires for us to be able to do that? Urbanization, of course, is also another important factor, with the share of urban population expected to grow by 60% or so by 2050, and economic growth, industrialization, and innovation. And I think, and this provides also a bridge to the conversation earlier, because in this energy and renewable energy space, there's quite a lot of space for young entrepreneurs to provide unique solutions for us to be able to tap renewable energy. And I think this will dictate what will become of this market. And I mean, Amadou, you mentioned that if we are not careful, some of our assets on which we depend to be able to claim renewable energy deployment in Africa might be redundant. They might be stranded. The same that is happening with coal, for example. And that is because technology innovations might render cobalt, for example, not as strategic as it is, because some countries in the West and otherwise, they want to reduce their dependence on supplies from Africa. So we need to mobilize money to be able to do these transitions. The African Development Bank suggests that we need up to 230 to 320 billion to invest in energy by 2025, and an additional 120 to 250 15 billion for the period 2026-2030 to meet what they call the New Deal for energy for Africa. And we have other numbers, which I don't want to bore you with. Basically, the question here, how are we going to get those resources to be able to enable greater coverage, energy coverage and access, and so on and so forth. And the sad story is that currently we are mobilizing $4 billion or so. I mean, the financiers will provide the exact numbers a year. So then I would say that to break this cycle, we need innovation and smart policies to crowd in investments. I think one strong argument that I would like to put across is that the business fundamentals of our projects needs to be strengthened, not only on the basis of the profit maximization, let's say, approach, so the financial economic returns, but also by taking into consideration environmental, social, and of course, the governance and transparency aspects of it, the so-called ESG factors. And I would also argue that by doing so, we would be able to expand the investors, including in this group, social conscious and environmental conscious, the impact investors, which are interested on those ESG factors. And so one could then design new financial instruments to mobilize finance for the energy sector, including green bonds and so on and so forth. So my other argument is that because of the very close link between minerals and renewable energies, and I'll provide some numbers later, I would argue that clustering minerals, energy, industrial development, trade, infrastructure, and agriculture development as part of the same package would strengthen the business fundamentals of our energy projects. So the designing of those projects, therefore, would need to look at those aspects of clustering, because otherwise, I mean, we would have energy or roads for nowhere and so on and so forth. So how to do that, I think it's an interesting proposition to explore. So let me be a little bit more specific about why this cluster. DRC, for example, produces 70% of the global cobalt that is required for you to produce batteries. And batteries are key for you to maximize the deployment of renewable energies, because it's batteries that store solar and wind energy, for example. So, and yet it captures only currently about 3% of the total value chain, that by 2025 is going to be about in excess of $8.8 trillion. So this is the magnitude of the business, which should, I would argue, entice captains of industry in Africa to be part of this. And it's not only about DRC. Other countries in Africa has all the other battery minerals. For example, South Africa has 80% of manganese and Gabon, for that matter, also is part of the 10 global producers. So we can therefore think of a regional value chain for the development of this battery and renewable energy deployment, in which Mozambique and Tanzania would produce the graphite that is needed for this, and so on and so forth. And we can provide you the numbers of all the other countries. So, and what is interesting now is that we are not talking of 100 megawatts or so to light small cities. With the developments, technology developments in battery storage capacity, now we can have solar parks that are in excess of 2,000 megawatts or so. With that, now you can link your renewable energy agenda with your industrialization agenda, hence that larger cluster that I've mentioned earlier. And the reference for that, for example, is the Blaja solar park in India that has in excess of 2,200 megawatts. So we need to have more of those in Africa. So, an important thing that also we need to look at is that the African Continental Free Trade Area strengthens the business fundamentals, a point that was made earlier, I think, by President Benedict Orama. And also the COVID-19 and the supply side disruptions that it created has made industrial policy and local content policies more, we call it, there's more appetite in the business community for those kinds of policies, because it's part of the strategy to reduce supply side risks. So I would argue, therefore, that with all of those fundamentals, one can mobilize innovative finance for the continent. So what should we do? I'll go quickly there. I think it's important to strengthen implementation capacity across different actors, including governments, and of course the private sector as well. I think we need to be able to provide on a regular basis a better understanding of what is the value of this market, including, for example, reference to this $8.8 trillion by 2050. And more of those numbers, I think, are required so that then the fundamentals, the credibility of the projects is strengthened accordingly. But the model is should not only be directed to the wealthy, the captains of industry. It should also incorporate small and medium enterprises. And I think this is where industrial policy becomes interesting, how to utilize local content policies to ensure that our small and medium enterprises can be part of the value chain. And the energy and the renewable energy and technology value chain has quite a lot of opportunities for small and medium enterprises, including young startups, to play a role in the provision of context-specific services and solutions for this. So I think understanding the depth of the value chain, I think, is part of what needs to be done for us to maximize welfare gains and development impacts in this area. I think we also need to be selective, special economic zones, because unfortunately we still have a lot of market failures. I see that I need to land, speaking a lot here. So I think there are institutions that have experience in helping countries to establish those special economic zones can play a role, because this is where the initial investments can be located. China has done it successfully. I think Africa can also do it. So I guess this is what I could share now. I think there is an opportunity to create a very, very interesting package of solutions and projects that embrace the entirety of this value chain. Over to you, Amadou.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pedro. You were not too long. You took the time necessary to actually really help us a picture of what's going on here. So thank you very much for that. And if we need you, throughout the discussion to come back and clarify some aspects, we may just do that. So, I want now to turn to Professor Orama from the Afrique Exim Bank. And we have heard about the necessity here about diversification, because Pedro, you have highlighted the opportunities, the risks, but also, you've spoken about really what to avoid in terms of, for instance, the cobalt being basically obsolete. And turning to you, Professor Orama, I would like to ask you, why is diversification so critical in our African economies?
No, thank you very much. And let me, before I proceed, Amadou, permit me to welcome my colleagues on this panel, and also to thank the UNECA and Dr. Vera Songwe for inviting me to participate. To understand the challenge Africa faces because of the series of concentrations that the continent is associated with, I just wanted to just put something out there. Every African country can easily be associated with one single or two commodities. If you name Africa an African country, you can easily say, oh, they are producing this, they are producing Nigeria oil, Ghana cocoa, Kenya coffee. But go to Asia, go to Europe. Can you tell me exactly what any country there produces? I think that's the beginning of this whole conversation. So we are an economy that is just dependent on one or two things. And we all know what that means. If somebody depends on one thing, it tells you the kinds of risks that entity faces. But let's even go beyond that, because that also then takes us further in the diversification question. If you go back in history to 1980, Africa was doing much better than Asia. In 1980, Asia's share of world trade was about 4%. Africa's share of world trade was about 5.5, even closer to 6%. In fact, it was about 6% of world exports. Now, fast forward to 2019, what have we seen? Asia's share of world trade has gone up to 20%, 1/5 of world trade. Africa's share of world trade has gone in the reverse. It's about 2.3%. But it isn't as if Africa wasn't doing anything. Africa was working harder than it was in 1980. But as it works harder, it moves back. Others are moving faster away from it. And why is that? It's because in 1980, if you take a few Asian countries, they were more or less like Africa. Today, they are much more diversified. They produce so many things that live in the world, in so many other things. But Africa has remained producer of single or double commodities per country, per country. And in fact, if you look at the whole continent, you can count the items that we produce in any significant quantity in your fingers. So it's nothing. So what that has meant for our countries and our continent is that we found ourselves in this unfortunate paradox that a continent that has high levels of unemployment is actually exporting labor, because we now ship commodities for others to use it to add value as much as they can. That's the value added is done in those places. And then that's where they get all the employment is made. Our people are unemployed. We ship what makes others to employ their own people. And then they ship the whole thing back to us. So we find ourselves in perpetual terms of trade difficulties, because although we produce everything, we get fewer in terms of the amount of money. And I think has just been demonstrated with respect to the cobalt and the copper example with regard to renewable energy. But what these tell you is that we have to move away from commodities and go into things that have higher value added. And actually, one of the
Professor Oroma, if I may, on that point, because you're really making a very clear point here, which shows why we are not actually reaping the benefits of the endowment we have on this continent. And on that very point, in taking into consideration the advent of the Africa Continental Free Area, what is the role of the African Exim Bank in actually improving, the intra-Africa trade, but also, helping create those value chains you're referring to?
Yes, I think we start from the point of view in African Bank that our greatest resources are actually the commodities. That Africa's greatest resource are the human beings. It's the abundant supply of labor we have on Africa. So what are we doing? So our view is that we should support activities that employ our people. And those activities that employ our people are those things that make it possible for us to add value, that make it possible for us to create regional value chains. And that is why our strategy in the bank, the arrowhead of our strategy is the promotion of intra-African trade. Because we see that when we start promoting intra-African trade, then other things will follow. Because what goes into intra-African trade is actually value-added products. Today, if you look at the total intra-African trade and say, what are the commodities that go into there? What are the items that go into there? You see almost half of the items that go into intra-African trade as value at the manufactured items. When you look at globally, it's a completely different story. It's raw materials that go outside. So we believe that by championing intra-African trade, we should be able to create the regional value chains that will create jobs, that will begin to make us gain comparative advantage, that will make us compete globally. And so what we're doing is we've launched an intra-African trade strategy a few years ago under intra-African trade initiative. And the pillars of that strategy are three: create, connect, and deliver. So under the create pillar, we are doing all those things that will help us produce the goods and services that will enter the trade. And that includes the work we are doing across the continent on supporting the development of regional, industrial parks and special economic zones. And we are doing that to deal with the issue of infrastructure today. We cannot build all the infrastructure to make us competitive globally and in producing goods. So we do the infrastructure within those special economic zones. The connect are those things we are doing to make sure that the goods that are produced have linked to the buyers. And here we have quite a number of things, including the payment system we have launched, which is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which will make it possible for us to trade in our own local currencies. The pilot phase of that particular initiative will start in a couple of weeks in the West African Monetary Zone to be expanded to the rest of the continent. And we're also supporting the emergence of export trading companies, because we believe that the fact that informal traders dominate in African trade is an evidence of institutional failure. We do not have companies that can trade, that can manage the risks of trading and can trade in large volumes. So the informal traders then fill the space. Whereas if you are able to create export trading companies, those will make it possible for international trade to happen better, for regional value chains to emerge. We're also then supporting in the deliver side, the emergence of the logistics and the regional infrastructure that will make it possible for us to deliver on those things. And that is where we also have the power aspects, where we are supporting renewable energy, which we believe would be a game changer for the continent, given the abundance of renewable energy we have all across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much, Prof. And that gives provide a wonderful actually transition to turn now towards Alain Ebobisse at Africa 50. And actually, Mr. Ebobisse, we've heard what Prof. Orama said. We've heard in the first segment also the presentation from the President of Kenya. And this brings me to ask, what is, in your view, the appropriate energy mix for the continent? How do we go about it?
Thank you, Amadou. And first of all, let me also say that I'm very pleased to be here, and thanks the distinguished fellow panelists, my brother Orama, and also thank ECA, my sister Vera, for inviting me to this very important discussion. For those of you in the virtual audience who don't know Africa 50, let me just say a couple of words. Africa 50 is a Pan-African infrastructure investment platform that was founded under the auspices of the African Union to help close the continent funding gap through private and PPP investment in infrastructure. We develop and invest in projects across Africa, but we focus, we operate like a commercial entity, even though we are owned by countries. Our shareholding is 28 African countries so far, the African Development Bank and 2 African central banks. And again, today we focus mostly on energy in our investments, but we are also looking at projects in the transport sectors and ICT. Now, the theme of this panel, in addition to the question, Amadou, was to leverage energy for economic development. First, and I will address your question, I think I have to make it very clear that our continent is committed and should continue to demonstrate its commitment to climate-friendly policies. That's clear. But we will also say very clearly that we will continue to rely on cleaner thermal fuels, such as natural gas, to generate the baseload power that we require on our continent to meet our urgent and huge development needs. I think it's very important to advocate for this balanced approach, for this appropriate African energy mix that balances climate and development goals, especially at this time when we are getting ready for the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow. The voice of Africa should be very clear. We are committed to implementing climate-friendly policies, but we also need to make sure that cleaner thermal sources of power, such as gas, are part of the mix. Now, whether we talk about renewable energy or transitional power for gas, I think the fact of the matter is that we need to significantly increase investment across the entire energy value chain. In the power sector, that means massive investment in generation, transmission, and distribution. At Africa 50, we are focused mostly on grid-based electricity generation using fuel sources that Africa has the most. That means solar, hydro, gas. But we also need to acknowledge the fact that we need to see a lot more off-grid, mini-grid solutions that will be part of helping us to achieve the ambitious SDGs target that we have to achieve. If I take solar power, for example, we have seen significant progress in solar energy over the last years, including through private investment, although a lot more remains to be done. Let me give a few examples because I think we need to show that things are happening on the ground. Sometimes we only talk about problems, but we also should talk about what is happening to create momentum. You have a fantastic Bemban 1.5 gigawatt solar project in Egypt. It's the largest in the world, or almost the largest, which is currently in operation. Africa 50 has invested in this project. I think in the presentation that Vera presented earlier, she also mentioned the 580 megawatt Noor solar power plant in Morocco. You have South Africa, who has almost over 4,000 megawatt in the renewable energies. Even small African countries are committing serious resources to solar. Just to mention one, Senegal, I picked it before I knew Amadou was here, but also His Excellency President Macky Sall, our brother, is doing a great job in putting renewable energy. 22% of Senegal energy mix today is renewables. Okay, most of it funded through solar, through private investment. President Kenyatta was here earlier, a big champion of renewable energies with Lake Turkana, geothermal energy. You know, we have good stories here, okay, which have happened. But and I can also mention what we are doing in the hydro space at Africa 50. We finance the Nachtigal project in Cameroon, which is a 420 megawatt hydro project in Cameroon, and maybe the Volove project in Madagascar. So stuff are happening on the ground. Again, as I said, we are doing renewables, but we're also doing gas. For example, we finance the Azura Power project in Nigeria. And we believe Africa is well endowed with gas. And gas should be part of the equation to drive Africa's development in terms of industrialization. I think my brother Orama was mentioning that we need more value-added products here. We need to create an industrial base, and we need a lot of energy. Renewables is part of the solution. We continue to do that. We are very committed. But in the short to medium terms, we also have to use cleaner sources of thermal to create that base load power that will enable us to be extremely good at industrializing product on the ground. I think it's very important to increase the amount of investment to achieve the SDG goals. I think this is quite important. So, and just to finish on that, I think the gap is still important. I think the AFDB estimated $130 to $170 billion of annual investment infrastructure, which is needed. Only $100 billion was spent in 2018, according to the Infrastructure Consortium in Africa. So we need to increase those amount of money quickly. If we had time and if we want to go into that, I could discuss about some of the constraints that we see and how we can actually go ahead and speed up and scale up what we are already doing on the ground. We know how to do it. Now we need to do it faster and bigger.
Exactly. Well, to that point, Alain, I was going to ask you, you mentioned gas, for instance, what kind of real investment, what kind of infrastructure investment we really need? And I think that's like a very important question. I know that you're saying we do a lot already in the continent, we do need to do more and better, but specifically, what are those kind of investment in infrastructure, and where do we get those resources for the investment?
Okay, no, that's an important point. First of all, we have a situation where, and I think Prof. Rama alluded to it, that most of the gas that we have been developing in Africa was targeted to export market. And then we started to say, well, wait a minute, I mean, we have no problem for exporting gas. But how about we also use our own domestic gas in our own countries? And you see more and more leaders and Africans saying, okay, absolutely, a big share of that gas has to come into the Africa. But there is a challenge that in order to use that gas, you need gas infrastructure. You need to be able to bring that gas from the fields, the production field, the gas fields, to the demand centers. And so it's about pipeline, it's about building these pipelines, LNG plants, the processing facilities, the midstream investments really, to bring this gas from the field to the demand centers. And that is continuing to be done. But I think that one of the things that I like to highlight is that we see the share of the private sector in the investment in the energy space on the continent is too small. Just two figures that I want to give to put things in perspective. The World Bank has produced some figures over the last 5 years, actually between 2015 and 2019. These are the figures that we have. On average, Africa receives $6.4 billion a year in private investment infrastructure. East Asia and Pacific, another emerging region, $33 billion a year in private investment in infrastructure. And Latin America, honestly, I used to cover Latin America. I used to be the global head of one of the infrastructure businesses at the World Bank Group. I cover Latin America. I did investment there. Latin America received the same period almost 30 billion. So we can increase this average annual investment that we receive from the private sector from 6.4 to 15 and one off to 10 to 20. If we do that, and there's appetite for people, including us, folks like African Bank, the African Development Bank, and others, to really to put these resources to use. I think we see that today, but we just need to accelerate the pace of making those investments work. And we also see that these are big numbers, but we also have to think about, schemes that will enable entrepreneurs to connect folks in the off-grid space, because in order to meet the access target, I think we cannot do it only with grid connected power. We also need to have mini grid, off-grid, and this is where we see lots of ideas from most of the time they're younger than us, entrepreneurs thinking about these business models that we should support to make sure that we can connect as many people as possible and try to meet the SDG target for energy access. So I want to add one last point, local currency financing. Local currency financing is very important for infrastructure. Right now, most of the infrastructure projects are financed with foreign currency, hard currency, which is certainly because we haven't developed enough our local currency market. So we need to make sure that we can actually do that so that we can enable local currency financing for private infrastructure, even public infrastructure. One last point, which I wanted to mention. I already mentioned that with my conversation brief with President Kenyatta, asset recycling. Asset recycling is also a way to enable governments to raise cash by offering concessions that they have to private investors, and we have appetite for that. The government will then raise that cash and recycle the cash in new infrastructure investments. I think this is another way where we can actually find ways to create more resources for more investment, because at the end of the day, we need more investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alain, for bringing up all those issues. And it's very telling. If you really need the private sector, our local African private sector, to be involved in this eminently strategic and important sector, indeed, we need to find all those mechanisms. And, this is a great transition to turn to Rolake Akingbube Filali. I mean, as I called her earlier, I consider her really as a grand madame of the African energy sector here. And she has a wealth of experience, which we want to tap in to help us really navigate. And Rolake, we have heard a lot in the first segment, but also in this sector, panel here about the role of the private sector. If you take the technology sector, the development, the boom, the innovation, it's all because we have a dynamic private sector there. So what is needed to help facilitate the local content policies so that we can have the emergence and the development of the African private sector in this?
Thank you very much, Amadou. And, I'm really glad to be here. And I must commend the great work that both African Bank and the Africa 50 Fund are doing to really develop infrastructure and trade across the continent. So my perspective is really, first of all, to say we need to, first of all, dimension the opportunities. As Alain has very eloquently said, we know hydrocarbons alone cannot meet Africa's energy demand. So for me, what are the biggest game changers? Because that is where we'll find opportunities. The biggest game changers will obviously be renewables in power generation, but it will also be areas like natural gas and maybe even electric vehicles in transportation. And I know a lot of people listening to that will say, well, this is very idealistic for a continent that has not fully conquered how to meet fossil fuel demand in the form of petrol and diesel. How do we leapfrog to this? I think the first thing we need to do very, very clearly, let us define what we mean by local content, right? Let's be realistic. What exactly do we mean by local content? It is about economic participation, it is about inclusion, and it is about diversity. if we look at local content as it has been implemented in some markets, it is the composite value of added services created in an economy. It goes beyond human capital. It actually looks at material resources and capabilities and how they are utilized in those countries. So if we look, for instance, at one of the game changers I mentioned, which is renewables in power generation, is first of all, what are we talking about? Let's look at the manufacture of solar panels, for instance. What are the obstacles that currently exist in the regulatory environment that will go a long way to helping to boost investment in this place? So we need investment-focused interventions in the manufacturing value chain. So we talked about the DRC production of cobalt, it's 70%, but its capture of the global value chain is only 3%. What we know that is globally, the supply chain for solar PVs is concentrated in China, but there's a real opportunity here with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, as well as initiatives being pursued by actors such as Afreximbank to really focus on this. We've also seen tariff imposition on Chinese exports to the US, which are actually causing American companies to diversify their battery production away from China. So for instance, how can countries like the DRC, like Zimbabwe or South Africa come together to create a value chain? And then the question is the competitiveness of African economies to actually produce or manufacture those value-added components, which is why I think there's a huge opportunity for cross-border collaboration. The other point here, the other opportunity I see is from the public sector is what are the existing regulatory obstacles that exist? For instance, we still have considerable levels of subsidies for the grid or diesel fuel or subsidies, which are still prevalent in much of the continent. This, in some respects, can make solar less attractive for some consumers. And I think when we're considering creating value-added services, we need to look at some of these structures. And then I have to talk about a really very, very important point is really around this implementation of local content. We have to be very, very careful here. Some countries have implemented very strict local content rules without a consideration for how competitive those industries are. We don't want a situation where we develop these local value chains and then producers or operators or developers are forced to pass on the high costs because they cannot manufacture competitively locally. They're then forced to pass on the high costs to consumers. So if local technologies are not competitive, then project developers will just be burdened with the higher costs and local performance. Another thing I would like to see us explore, and if you look at traditional or conventional industries such as energy or mining in some countries from DRC to Tanzania to Nigeria, the Local Content Act has actually gone a step further and provided for how local companies bid for contract awards. One of the trends that I've seen across the continent is that a lot of solar PV developers are usually foreign-owned entities that set up African distribution hubs. So we might, for instance, want to explore principles such as the fact that if we have an indigenous company that is bidding for the contract, the principle of award should just not be based solely on the lowest bidder. So for instance, in Nigeria, we allow in some of the traditional energy spaces for indigenous companies to bid within a certain price band, even if it's not as competitive as some of the other foreign players. And then I think we need to adopt forward-thinking policies on value addition. This goes without saying. China has done it. We need to think about that. Let's look at battery manufacture, battery component production. How can we localize that production within Africa? This is where I think supply chain investment interventions are absolutely critical to develop robust policy measures. And then capacity building and development of SMEs and other vendors. We need to find ways to tie this and match this directly to our economic needs. So for instance, recently, the Nigerian government talked about the electrification at the residential segment of the market, 25 million solar PV installations. Now, who is going to install this 25 million solar PV installations? It's going to come from local companies. Are they in a position in terms of delivery or performance track record to deliver those services. Some of these services range from basic installation services to EPC, contracting, to consulting services. If you look at markets like Kenya and Ghana, you have companies that have, for instance, provided energy services via power purchasing agreement for large-scale corporations. So clearly across the continent, we have a reference point in terms of capacity building. So there is a need to actually directly match those opportunities with those green recovery initiatives. Another one that is particularly close to my heart is that—
Yeah, thank you. Please finish.
The last one, yes. The very last one is that a key part of economic participation and local content is access to finance and financial instruments, right? I really love the fact that Alain talked about long-term local currency, and I must add single-digit local currency funding for developers, because we have different models. We have models in the renewable energy space where people are making outright purchases, but we also have equipment leasing and rent to own. So some of these structures need to be financed over time. And I think local banks need to play a more active role, partnering with development finance institutions. And then we need to make it easier for local SMEs to achieve credit ratings so that local capital markets, such as bond markets, can be mobilized for access to finance. And one of the best ways to achieve this is also to explore aggregating both customers and SMEs in the value chain, because the more scalable these projects are, the more attractive they'll be from a portfolio perspective to investors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rolake. I mean, you really unearthed a lot of issues here, but what that says is really there's huge opportunities, untapped opportunities in this sector. And you mentioned the aspect about inclusion. You also spoke about diversification again. I mean, all of these show us that the pipeline is huge, and then the needs are really there. So staying on the idea of diversification and inclusion, actually, I would love to turn now to Boubacar Diallo. And now I'm going to speak in French because we'll be exchanging.
You can do it in English if you want. I'm going to talk in English like the others in the panel. Don't worry.
Okay. Well, if we want to continue in English, then we'll do so. And so, Boubacar, I just want you to share with us through your experience, the work you've been doing on the continent. What is the urgency you have felt for our countries diversifying in this sector? But also, Rolake mentioned the inclusion aspect, and some other, I think it was Professor Orama, who mentioned also the inclusion aspect. I want you to touch a little bit in that, keeping in mind how to create good, dynamic, and decent jobs for the youth in particular.
Okay, thank you very much, Amadou. I'm very glad to be here and to share with this high-level panel. So here I'm the entrepreneur, the small entrepreneur. I did things, but not like the other members of the panel. I'm a young entrepreneur and the founder of a company called Benu, a company which supports the energy transition of African businesses, particularly in rural areas. So we have a very high focus to understand what people need in rural areas, which is a place where people are living today. A great part of the population are living in the rural areas. And we work in Togo, Burkina, and Ghana. To answer to your question, there is an important thing when we talk about energy. What we try to do every day when we go to the field is to stop talking about energy to people. Because in reality, people don't care about energy. They care about what we can do with energy. So this is a thing that I understood after 5 years working on that, because at the beginning I was more focused on understanding, well, people, what they want solar, they want hydro, they want gas, what are the levels of environment and of GE's emissions. So more of focus around technology. But finally, when you go to the ground and you start talking to people, They just want something. They have a machine, an appliance, and they just want this appliance run correctly. And this point of view and this way of looking to things, you can use it for very small businesses, but you can also do it for very big businesses. Like our initial discussion about cobalt. When we talk about cobalt, it's great. It's an extraordinary opportunity. But at the same time, if you want to industrialize the cobalt industry, if you want to bring and to do your own batteries in the country and create a value with this asset, you need energy, you need infrastructures, you need roads, you need that energy to produce. Are we able to do that in the short term? I'm not really sure right now. So this is only to show that the initial point of the discussion is it's around diversification and understanding on what are the initial needs of the different countries. As I said, we work in Togo, in Ghana, in Burkina Faso, and every often we see the same things. Rural areas and peri-urban areas are places where cash and money is flowing very easily in reality. But this money is flowing in the agro business. There is a lot of agribusiness, and we see that if you bring the good energy to people, they can increase the value that they are generating in their own business in the agro business, because the first need today is to eat, is food. So if you go to the simple things, this is where there is probably a need to do something. We see also that when we focus on the main activities like those agribusiness is the best way for inclusion, but for natural inclusion, because we know that using those activities like agribusiness is more easy to bring the young entrepreneurs in that businesses, because it's simple, it's easy to understand, and also to bring women inside, because they are already part of the agribusiness in a certain way. So I think that is really important when we talk about energy, to have in mind the technology side, the infrastructure side, the fact that we need to create value, rentability, ROE, but we need also to really focus on what this energy, what we are going to do with this energy, what is the kind of activities that we are going to be created in the country. And it's very important because this activity that is going to be created is going to create value, is going to create revenues, and those revenues are there to pay for the energy. Because we have a focus on energy as a public sector, but to make it private, we need also to develop the affordability of the people on the ground, and this is through the diversification.
Thank you very much, Boubacar, for that clarity. I don't see Professor Oroma in my screen, but I think he's still there. And on this point, Professor Oroma, what do we need to do, and how can you help Alain? Also, if you want to take this question, how do we help create more of Boubacar and his outfit on the continent, so that we can get at the level at which he's speaking about? But Prof. Oroma is not there.
Are you hearing me?
Oh, okay. So you're back.
I don't know what that was. No, thank you very much, Boubacar, for what you are doing, actually. I think it is people like Boubacar that will be the engine room of the development we are all looking for. But we have to give them the platform so that they can excel. And some of the kinds of things that Rolake was saying, I think, address the question you asked. But let me say that there are two key things that people like Boubacar need. They need an enabling environment. They need governments to put the environment and just stay away from them. And then they need access to markets. Very, very important, because you can do all the things you want to do. If you are not able to go and do it somewhere, to do it for somebody, then the business will collapse. And of course, finally, the appropriate financing that is required. And in all of this, I think Africa started in a good way in 2018 when we launched the AFCFTA. But what the AFCFTA does then is that it begins to create the regulatory framework that is in many cases Pan-African. It begins to harmonize the way we trade. And over time, we begin to harmonize the way we do business in our different countries. So if you are in Burkina Faso and you are in a particular type of business, if you go and try to do it in Cote d'Ivoire, you are likely to do it under the same kind of regulatory regime. We haven't gotten there yet, but that is the journey. We've started the journey now. And then if you want to trade, so there's clarity for you about the, especially with tariff. So you know that if I go and if I produce something gradually, it is like producing for one market. Because whether I produce it in Cote d'Ivoire, produce it in Ghana or Nigeria, it will be the same thing. What will then determine how I'm able to sell it will be the first, how competitively I'm able to produce at the factory floor, and of course, the infrastructure to move it from one point to the other. But it is important that we develop a trade information system very well, because given the colonial legacies we have, we do not know what is happening across our borders. I'm sure if I ask Baka whether he knows somebody in Kenya who may need the kinds of services, the kinds of things he just described, he probably scratch his head and don't know. But if I ask him, maybe if you wanted to buy something from China or Europe, do you know where to go? He probably know immediately. So we need to begin to develop the trade information portal that will make it possible for us to deal across our borders. And then the issue of currency, which I think Alan mentioned and Rolake also harped upon. If we do not create a system where our currencies then become the means of exchange first, before we then make the journey to a single currency sometime in the future, we'll probably not be able to begin to do local currency well. And I say this because we are discussing now with the African Stock Exchange Association based on the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System to see how we can make it possible to create more liquidity for certain stock exchanges in Africa. How? There are about 5 exchanges they've identified for the pilot phase. So if you take one exchange, say the stock exchange in, say, Nigeria, for example, then it is possible then for somebody in Egypt here to buy shares in the stock exchange of Nigeria. You will pay for that in Egyptian pound. Whereas the person who is selling, who is in Nigeria, will get Nigerian naira. What that will do immediately is that we infuse liquidity into some of our stock exchanges. And if it then begins to infuse liquidity into that, it will then begin to have other impact on other aspects of the financial markets and begin indirectly to begin to drive down the yield curves in through secondary effects. So these are some of the things I think people like Baka will need: access to markets, harmonized and clear regulatory environment, the infrastructure to move their goods, the financing that they require, and the financing maybe in the currency that they are able to manage better rather than in foreign currency that exposes them to foreign exchanges that they are not equipped to manage at this level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much, Prof, for highlighting, what really should be done to facilitate the participation of this private sector if we really want to be in this critically important sector, which is the energy sector, where we are starting to go in the technology sector. So it's very, very important, and thank you very much for that. So I would like now to open this to the question and answer session. before actually just trying to build on what you said, Prof. Orama here, and what other participants have started talking about, which is at the end of the day, we need to create some sort of a coalition of the willings so that we can have this sector initiate that turn which is needed to unlock the value which is in there. And that would be in the segment we should just be following this discussion. So I have received a couple of questions here, I think only two. One is addressed to Boubacar, and it's actually talking about energy access and agriculture and agribusiness attractiveness. Boubacar, in your experience in the areas, in the countries you are working with, can you just, I think you started talking about it, but can you just reiterate for the question we have here, what does access to energy do to boost agribusiness?
I think for agribusiness, energy can boost particularly two activities. Those are examples, but are examples that I know. The first one is, for example, in Burkina Faso, the capacity to bring irrigation. If you can change the pumps, the genset pumps that we use normally, that are quite expensive, with a solar pump, you can drastically reduce, and with the good financing scheme, like leasing or other mechanisms, you can drastically reduce the cost for that small farmer of the access to water. It's just as easy as that. So if you have that, the revenues of this farmer is going to increase. Another example is for all that is related to the cold value chain. This is a huge market for energy, because the cold value chain, you need it at the beginning of the end of the culture. You need it for conservation, just for conservation, and you need it also to bring it to the city. This is very, very important to develop that, to have this close connection between energy and cold services. If we want in our countries to have to eat our own food and not the food coming from outside.
Thank you very much, Boubacar. And we have a second and last question here on industrial clustering, and as a way to strengthen local content. And Alain or Pedro, if any one of you two or Rolake wants to tackle this question, it would be great. So again, it's industrial clustering as a way to strengthen local content.
I can make a very, very quick contribution. There are two things. Is that one of the things that we haven't done quite well as a continent is dimension our needs at different industrial clusters. So for the energy sector, there's the large scale industrial projects which still require gas-fired generation, embedded generation. Then you have a booming commercial and industrial space, the commercial and industrial users. And of course, you have the residential space. I think this is going to be absolutely key, particularly in those countries where we have the creation of export-free zones or free trade zones. I think we need to work between the public and private sector to think about how we create clusters and economies for offtake on the one hand, because I think that is going to be important for industrial offtake as well as for the commercial and industrial space. And then very quickly, the very last thing I want to say is something I think which is a huge opportunity. When we saw the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the fastest responders in terms of deployment of energy solutions was the off-grid space. And I think this just demonstrates the intersectoral synergies for the off-grid market and the huge potential it has. It was the quickest solution for temporary isolation and COVID-19 treatment centers. And then finally, the collaboration between financial technology and renewable energy, particularly as it concerns the solar space. I think a lot of investors are used to funding the large-scale utility projects, but if we look at the some of the commercial and residential space, there's a need for nimble and innovative solutions and creating hubs that can really serve that part of the market. I just thought I would mention that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rolake. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you I call her the Grand Madame of the Africa private sector, energy sector. So you can see her wealth of experience and the depths of her knowledge in this area. So I mentioned earlier trying to create some sort of a coalition of willing to go and really start the deep work of revolutionizing this sector. Before we get to that, I'm not sure if Dr. Songwe is still with us, and then if we can have her comment before we move it and turn it over to the Team Africa Energy with Linus Mofor and NJ Ajuk. Dr. Songwe, are you there, Vera?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, yes. No, I'm with you. I think I can't speak after Professor Rammer and Alain and Rolake and Boubacar. I really like your question, Boubacar, on what are we doing energy for? And I think this is the fundamental question. It's really, you know, there is a lot of conversation about powering Africa, but I think the question is for what? And then Rolake, of course, is to say that we do need to differentiate, you know, the kinds of power supplies. And therein comes the idea of why, you know, Africa 50 and Afreximbank then have to segment their offerings into local currency and cheaper currency and faster dispersing currency so that we can do that. So I think on this panel, we have something that can begin to deliver energy for Africa in a way that is powerful. So just thank you. And I think Africa for Africa's energy is possible. I think it's doable. Alain has given a lot of examples of some of those energy projects, and now we need Africans to do some of those projects. And I think that's where the local content becomes important. We've done local content in mining, we've done some local content in textiles, but we do need to start getting Africa's power energy giants, Africa's energy producers like Boubacar. Maybe Boubacar, you become the next GE or the next NL Power. You know, we shouldn't always look to someplace else for the biggest energy producers that are investing in the continent. We need them to be Africans as well. So that's a little bit the next segment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vera. And I would like now to turn it over to Linus Mofor, but building on what Dr. Songwe just said, I mean, it's critically important, as in anything, to have, you know, the leaders, really the visionaries, the pioneers, those who are there at the beginning, and then which will be pulling everybody else with them, and who would serve actually as, you know, that beacon of light where people can see and say they want to join it, they want to go there. And, you know, and maybe this is me advancing a little bit more, but along with the Team Energy Africa, we should really start thinking about along the line of something which exists somewhere else, like a battery alliance for this continent. You know, there's no African battery alliance, to my knowledge at this time. And yet we know that we have all the resources necessary if this is going to be, if like the renewable energy and the battery segment is going to grow, the most of it we have from the continent, and we need to start to create those kind of alliances and those kind of coalition of willing to be able to move forward. So without further ado, I want now to move it over to Linus. Linus, are you there? Linus Mofor? And
yes, Amadou, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Over to you, Linus, for the Team Energy Africa.
So this session, our session is concluded, right, Amadou?
Well, yeah, this is actually like, so we're sliding into that, but if you're asking the question because you have another commitment, feel free. I would like them to thank you for that. But I was going to give it to them because I think it's all part of the same package here.
Okay.
So no, thank you very much, Amadou. In fact, I just want to use some numbers that Dr. Songwe mentioned earlier on in the transition between the two sessions. She talked about the fact that the current capacity in Africa is only 250 gigawatts, and that to really make some progress, we need to go up to 250, additional 250 from clean energy by 2030. So presently, most of the investments in that 250 capacity have been from the public sector. And Alain and Professor Orama, they made the case that the private sector investments are very, very small. So I want to use 2 slides to try to contextualize why the private sector is important, and even more so, why Africa's private sector role is very important in Africa's energy transformation. So the SDG, so can we have the presentation, please? So the SDG 7 initiative, which Dr. Songwe started here at the ECA, is aimed at aligning the interests between the private sector, member states, and development partners to fast track the investments that are needed to do Africa's energy transformation and address energy access and climate action. It is based on 3 pillars. The first pillar is that of sustainability, where the member states commit to looking at the clean energy transition in terms of their nationally determined contributions to climate action. And also there's a sustainability element in the sense that the investor, the private sector investor, has got a moderate rate of return on investment. The second pillar is on governance. And we need to understand why is it that the private sector investment in Africa have been very small. These were mentioned about infrastructure in general, but if you look at the last report of the Bloomberg Frankfurt School UNEP Global Trends in Renewable Energy Investments in 2019, of the 282 million that was invested in clean energy globally that year, less than 1.5% came to Africa, and even that 4 billion or so that came to Africa went to just about 5 countries: Kenya, Morocco, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and so on. So we need to understand what is it that is stopping the investment from the private sector happening by addressing the governance issue. And I also like to point out here that the ECA, in collaboration with the Rest for Africa, is doing a regulatory, comprehensive regulatory analysis of what is happening in the countries, with the countries, so that these governance issues can be best understood and addressed. And then we believe that if we address the sustainability and governance issue, then raising the finance, which is the third pillar of the initiative, through bonds from the capital market should be much easier, and we couldn't mobilize the private sector there. So the advantage of this SDG 7 then is that you mobilize the support of big players globally. We have the Pacific Investment Company, PIMCO, which is a big ESG investor. Pedro mentioned this earlier, that is supporting this. It also makes a case for investments in transmission and distribution. And this is critical because, you know, we keep talking about private sector investments, but most of the time we're talking about those investments going into generation. But there is only so much generation that certain countries can take because they don't have the infrastructure to take it to where it is needed. So investments in transmission and distribution are very, very important. And we don't yet have the blueprint on how we can bring private capital because the public capital has not been there. Remember that we're talking about that capacity of 250 that's happened over more than 5 decades. And we're going to add a similar amount over 1 decade. And when the public has not been able to invest, so this has to come from the private sector. And how do we then bring, what are the innovations which we can use to bring the private sector to, or private sector capital to put into the investments in transmission and distribution? Because when you do that and invest in interconnectors that link the power pools, then the investment case for the private sector becomes very strong because you are now able to balance supply and demand, where you generate where the resource is highest and therefore cheapest, and it is consumed where it is needed. So that is what the initiative can also help do, and then it can also help to leverage the political will on the continent because leaders want this to happen. You can also help to mobilize some of the money with low interest rates globally, because usually, as you all know, when you meet the people that have the money, they say they don't have bankable projects. When you meet the policymakers who need the energy, they say they cannot find the money. And so we need to find a way of matching, and this initiative can help do that. So now the role of the private sector is key, and this is what the initiative is going to do. But most importantly is the role of Africa's private sector. So that is why Dr. Sengwe also came up with this order. And we have the next slide, please. This other idea that how do we mobilize private sector from Africa to do this energy transformation on the continent? Because at the moment, the small private sector investment, which is very tiny, less than 1.5% in 2019, over the last 10 years, less than 2% is coming from abroad. But there are many things that we have examples in other sectors. You just mentioned, Abubakar, where the private sector has been able to transform Africa in telecoms and so on. How can we get the same African private sector to transform the energy transformation for Africa, to industrialize Africa, to do the CFT and all of this? When we bring a group of like-minded Africans who have the money, they understand the African landscape, they are able to make more influence or impart more influence on governments to do what is needed to address that key middle pillar of the policy and regulatory, the governance pillar, so that the investments can happen. They understand the risk in the market, because one of the challenges that governments do have is that when the private sector come, they put a very high premium because Africa has got this high perceived risk, which is different from the real risk. Bringing Africans together who understand their continent means that they can remove that high perceived risk and so on. And Alain and Professor Rama, you mentioned, and Rulake, you mentioned about local currency. Again, bringing a group of African private sector people, they can help governments with local currency financing for clean energy investments, and bringing them together also help to create an open playing field on the continent so that you can begin to see what is the lay of the land in terms of the opportunities that exist across East, Southern, Northern, West Africa, so that the private sector people can begin to see where the biggest opportunities lie. So this is the idea about the Team Energy Africa, that you bring African business to invest to power Africa's prosperity. And that this is believed to be one of the ways that can actually make the transformation to happen, because the critical area of investment in transmission and distribution, where usually governments would be hesitant to think about private sector investments, but when you start thinking about the CFTA that brings Africa together and then bringing Africa's capital to invest in Africa's infrastructure, could be one of the ways that we actually transform and then bring in more investment that can go into generation as well. And then we can begin to address some of the key issues that were mentioned before. And in some of the slides that Dr. Songwe showed earlier also, you saw a number that about 70 gigawatts of IPPs are being proposed on the continent. But there's also an analysis that shows that most of those projects will not go to financial close because of various things that need to be addressed. So while the need is there and the gap is there, we have to do all of these things. And then another thing is that we are already learning on the continent in the sense that the IPPs for renewable is happening. Some of the cheapest prices have been seen in places like Zambia and Senegal and Kenya and so on. So we have this learning that is happening, and we now have the opportunity to replicate that learning going forward. But most importantly, when you look at the climate dimension, in the nationally determined contributions of African countries under the Paris Agreement, the clean energy actions that we have looked at there are only about 22 gigawatts. So you're only talking about investments of about 40 billion. But this 40 billion is far more than that 4 billion that we've said was able to come into the continent. So even for this small ambition, the investments are still big, but we can go much, much higher. So the idea then is that whilst you have a team of Africans who understand the continent, who understand the global landscape of finance, can be able to bridge the gap between the continent and the private sector from abroad, and then work with member states to deliver on the Africa energy agenda. So this is the idea, and we'd love to hear your perspectives and your views on how to take this forward and how to mobilize momentum and support for it. Thank you, Amadou.
Thank you very much, Linus. And I think this is really the way to start, things to change, to make an impact, to move the needle. I mean, you need to have a group, which, as I keep referring to, which is a coalition of the willing. I think we have NJ Ayuk with us, who is the president of Africa Energy Chamber. NJ, are you with us? Yes.
Sir, Amadou, how are you?
Good to see you. Over to you.
Thank you, Amadou. I think there is not much to add. You know, the last thing you need a lawyer to go is after someone behind the stick and Rolake. They just take everything and you just say amen to when they speak. So for Team Energy, I think it's going to be one of those Renaissance projects that would shape the African energy landscape. And I just want to thank Dr. Vera for having us participate in this. I would say at the African Energy Chamber, we were a little bit shocked when we got the email getting invited, because we always felt we were like the bastard children when it comes to getting invited on some of the most important things because of the oil and gas industry that we represent. We do believe that our industry has a big role to play, that if you are going to produce cleaner, safer, and efficient energy for Africa, you have to have the oil and gas industry participate in that. But what is most important is that African energy industry. So, as Dr. Vera mentioned, some of the victories that have been won in the mining space and even the energy space, the oil and gas space, on local content. Right now, how do we transform those local giants, those local African entrepreneurs that get in, day out, to really meet the challenges of our future? Climate change is something that we all have to deal with, we have to believe in. And some of the previous speakers were really on point, like Alain from Africa 50. We believe we're going to meet our climate challenges with gas. And the Team Energy, we want to contribute. We really want to participate in this. And I believe that if we get that enabling environment, we get that limited government, and also some of the barriers that have prevented Africans from traditionally investing in Africa, I think the time is now. The Continental Free Trade Act is a step in that direction. It's shocking, but in 2021, we just had something that could really merge a 1 billion market together. And if in the time of climate change and you're talking about solar and renewables and gas monetization, it is Africans that are going to drive that. It's small African businesses that I met in cities like Kampala and Dakar and Douala and Port Harcourt and Lagos. Those young Africans that get up every day to say, we want to really drive a car content and we want to write our own chapter. We want to be like a pencil, like what Mother Teresa says, a pencil in the hand of God writing our own history. This is your time and business is with you. We will stand with you. We will work with you. We will be demanding. When we disagree, we would let you know. But we believe that we love money. We want to make a lot of money. So we see opportunity. So as the opportunities arise, we want to engage in that opportunity and we want to make sure that Africans participate because sometimes we have been better. But as in conclusion, we also abide and believe very strongly in the role of women in this. We believe, as President Kenyatta said, you can't X out 50% of your population out of this economy. We still live in a difficult industry. In our industry, the oil and gas industry, women are still the last hired and the first fired. Women still represent under 7% of that population in the workforce. It has to change. We're not proud of that. It must change now. But as we charter this and be part of Team Energy, we want you to hold us accountable. We want you to push us and really drive us to meet that challenge. Because when you push us, when you hold us in our hand and where we fail, you whip us and get us to meet that challenge. We think it makes Africa better. And our children, my 3 children, will be proud of the Africa that we leave behind and the Africa that we dream of. Thank you so much and long live Team Energy and thank you. And we look forward to really getting all the oil and gas industry to commit to this because it is good for Africa.
Thank you very much, NJ. I mean, that's a really fitting, inspiring and forward-looking really call to action and very important, asking also to be held to account because that's the other aspect of things we haven't spoken about here, but critically important if we're going to be making progress. and get to where we want to get. You know, I would like to bring this panel to a close now and thank, you know, I think we all heard about, you know, the great opportunities, the threats which are there, but also the plentiful of energy, and I mean human energy, not the mineral, like human energy we have, and the vision we have on the continent to really unlock the value which is there and help power not only our continent, but also the world, and contribute in the best way possible. Rolake, I can't thank you more and can't thank you really enough for being with us this afternoon. Thank you very much, Boubacar, and Prof. Orama, always great to hear from you. Alain Eboubisse, good to see you again. And on that, I would thank all of you and all of the audience. And of course, Linus, we will be following and see where Team Africa Energy goes. Thank you very much, and over to you now to Zain.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Amadou. Great job. Very good conversation that we had there over the last hour or so with the panelists. Thank you to all the panelists for your time, your energy, different kind of energy, and your insights and sharing it with us today. And I see so many of the audience members are still with us to listen to some of these very compelling arguments and stories that are really important for us to get together and share in the manner that we have. We've reached the time now where we need to close this. So I'd like to invite everyone to watch this short video, followed by some closing remarks by Dr. Vera Songwe. Please watch. Wonderful. Thank you to Afri-Exim Bank and the sponsors for this event. Now I'm happy to close this session shortly, unless Dr. Vera Songwe would like to say a few words. Vera, say a few words. This has been a great day. You've created this fantastic session for all of us. And
oh, thank you, everybody. I think we've reached it's 5:30. We'd let everybody go. Thank you so much. I think we've heard 2 or 3 things today. One is ICT, the future. We can finance it. We can do it. We've seen, I think, an amazing showcase of young African CEOs in the ICT space, in the energy space with Boubacar Rolake. The future is ours. The Africa we want is at our fingertips. We've heard a leader say that he was willing to give us the policy environment to deliver it. So I suppose the Africa Business Forum is here to match policymakers and business and to see where we can take it forward. Hopefully that we have given you some more hope on the AFCFTA with everything you've heard, all the possibilities from Afri-Exim Bank and Africa 50, the African Development Bank. There are institutions on the continent that can do this. There are businesses on the continent that can do this. There are women on the continent that can do this. There are youth that can do it. And so I suppose in closing, let's go do it. Thank you very much and stay safe. Stay safe, most importantly. Thanks for spending the time with us today. Thank you, Zain.
Thank you, Vera.
Back over to you.
Thanks. Awesome. Thank you so much, Vera. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, Professor Orama.
Bye-bye. Take care. And wash your hands, wear a mask, and all that. Take care. Bye-bye.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you. Thank you. I had fun. Hope everybody else did.